Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. I think that won.
We'll do the roll call again.
We gave him a provisional check-off.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
He's in the parking lot on.
Yeah, he's on the premises. Meanwhile, back to business here. Public comment. Any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled before them the same day. Total time is 15 minutes. Do we have any speaker slips?
I have no speaker slips.
Thank you. Notices that the Lease Review Subcommittee met on Wednesday, May 30th, 2012 in the Airport Administration Building. The meeting minutes are attached. The General Aviation Subcommittee, what did I say the first time?
Lease.
Did I say lease? Good. Brain.
To the lease review?
So
Thank you.
You don't pay attention to yourself?
No, I wasn't hearing it. The General Aviation Subcommittee met on Monday, June 4th in the Airport Administration Building. The meeting minutes are attached. That Wednesday, June 13th, the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. Do we have a motion about minutes?
I'd make a motion to waive the reading and approve the minutes of the meeting Wednesday, May 16th.
It has been moved and seconded to waive the reading of the minutes. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So noted. Which brings us rapidly to the consent calendar. Do we have any comments, questions, additions, subtractions?
Mr. Chair, I'll have to recuse myself. I have a conflict with number 6, item number 6.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Those in favor of those laughing about something. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Crack me up. Sorry.
It's his fault.
We've lost him now. That's the problem.
Did we ever have it?
No.
Tracy, be quiet.
Quiet over there. Which brings us briskly to liaison reports. I see one.
We have Councilmember Rouse.
Yes. Well, if you have anything to share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I'm aware of for us coming up on the calendar will be the naming, which the committee has so generously handed to the council to determine what that's. So I'm looking forward to that presentation report. Other than that, I don't have anything specific from council other than unless staff can remind me of something pending that we're chatting about these days.
Can you approve the budget?
The budget was approved as presented, so we're good.
Good job.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. Administrative report.
Well, as you know, with the airline terminal project, we implemented a public art program for the terminal, and we, through the construction or the major construction phase, we implemented many projects within the terminal. In 2010, the Pierre Clysons Veterans Museum and Library Foundation approached staff about they wanted to commission a piece of art that recognized the airport's Marine Corps Air Station that operated here during World War II, as well as the Marines. And so we batted around some ideas. You know, they're initial ideas were more along the lines of a literal airplane or a bust of a pilot or that type of thing. So we really worked with the City Arts Advisory Committee members and Santa Barbara County Arts Commission staff, who also staff the City Arts Advisory Committee, to talk about some different ideas. So tonight we're going to make a presentation of a concept, and I thought it would be helpful to review kind of how public art is approved in the city of Santa Barbara. Since, actually, I think before 1984, the city had a City Arts Advisory Committee, and at that point they really formalized the approval and placement of public art on public property. A subcommittee of the City Arts Advisory Committee is a Visual Arts and Public Places Committee, or VAP, and their role is to review all public art projects proposed within the city. They are advisory to City Council on acquisition, placement, and presentation of high-quality public art on public property. And, you know, art is always in the eye of the beholder, I guess. So they play a major role in approving public art projects in the city. Additional review for any proposed public art project would go to, in our case, for this project, architectural board review. If it's within the historic landmarks district downtown, it would also go to Landmarks Commission. And if it were in the harbor, it would go to Harbor Commission, and it's the airport, so it comes to Airport Commission. And in this case, it has gone to Architectural Board of Review, and they review it not so much about the artwork per se, but they look at the appropriateness of its presentation as it relates to the setting and with the adopted design guidelines. And then, of course, Airport Commission, and in our case, Planning Commission, because it will need a coastal development permit. As I said, the Pierre Clysons Veterans Museum and Library approached us in 2010 about wanting to commission a piece of public artwork. The commissioned work, what their concept was to pay tribute to the Marines in the Marine Corps Air Station Santa Barbara. Over the years, we've had many proposals, not for art necessarily, but to do something on the airport related to all military, all wars, that type of thing, and to kind of keep it to specific to our airport and its history. We kind of restricted it or kept it along with the World War II, not necessarily have to be Marine Corps, but World War II. So this was a fitting at least purpose for this project. The initial concept that we came up with, which you saw in 2010, was a series of glass flags that would line one of the walkways between the old terminal or the historic terminal and the new terminal. And the panels would have photographs that would depict the airport's role when it was a Marine Corps Air Station. So we had this kind of general concept. In November of 2010, we went out with a request for qualifications and distributed it widely to various artists for the design, fabrication, and installation of the artwork. And in January 26th, we received 5 proposals, and then by February, 2 artists were selected to develop concepts for the selection committee to review. And members of the selection committee were representatives from the City Arts Advisory Committee, VAP, myself, and the Santa Barbara County Arts Commission representatives. So they were, other than myself, people who had a lot of art experience and a major art role in our community. In April, artist Douglas Lochner was selected and went on to, with a direction to further refine concepts. In November of last year, Mr. Lochner requested permission to explore an alternative design. There were issues with the glass flag concept, and if you're interested during his presentation, you may ask more specific questions about that. He's better qualified to answer than me. And then on January 19th, we met again with the selection committee and told them of the request to change the design direction. And he brought some different concepts of which led to what he's going to propose tonight. And the committee thought it was a worthy change of concept and recommended that we take it to the City Arts Advisory Committee and VAP. And in February, VAP reviewed it and the alternative design, and they were enthusiastic and approved it as proposed in concept. On April 30th, we took it to ABR to see if this change was amenable to them, because originally we had taken the concept, the flag concept, to them, and they approved it in concept. So we needed to go back and see if this change was okay with them. They were generally pleased with the design concept. They thought the location was appropriate. They just cautioned that the height not compete with the height of the historic terminal or diminish that in any way. And then tonight, of course, we have your review and comment. This is a chart that just shows the public art review process. An applicant will submit a master application like you would for any project, development project or construction project in the city. They have the VAP preliminary review, then you have ABR preliminary review, Airport Commission preliminary review, and then it'll go through a round of the final reviews, and with the addition of Planning Commission because of the coastal development permit. And then finally, we'll go to council as much for the approval as contracts with Pierre Kleissens in order to accept the artwork and have anything that we outline in terms of maintenance or the construction of it and so forth. So that's sort of in a nutshell what the approval process is for public art in our community. And with that, I would like to introduce Douglas Lochner. He is a local artist from Oakview and has a very esteemed resume of projects that he has completed, and I think he, if not in your past, at least in recent years, has specialized in public art. So Douglas, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, again, I'm Douglas Lochner. As you heard, this has been a fairly long road to get to this point. I responded to the request for qualifications for the flag, the 5 flags that were in the original proposal, and was ultimately awarded that commission. As Karen had mentioned, there were some issues that I felt that concept had. I did a mock-up of one of the flags and showed what I felt those issues were, and then asked that if they were interested in exploring other concepts. The committees were gracious enough to allow me to do that, and I came up with a dozen different concepts. The one that has gained the most traction, that's been approved by VAP and the ABR and everything, is the one you're going to see tonight. And it came directly out of input from airport staff, the Arts Commission, both City and County Arts Commission, and the Kleissens Museum. And there's there's a little bit of tug of war, that's probably too strong a statement, but different approaches to commemorating these men and women who served in World War II. As I'm sure you're aware, anything that involves war becomes a sensitive subject for a lot of people. So this approach allows us to commemorate the men and women who served without creating a tribute to war itself or to conflict. And I felt that was a very important role of this piece, especially in this situation, in this location.
While Douglas is doing that, I just wanted to make a point. Articles in the paper and kind of talk out in the community is referring to this as a memorial, and it's not a memorial. And we were very clear on that with the Pierre Kleissens group. We already have a World War II memorial that we just dedicated a couple of years ago on the airport. And this is really a tribute to these people who really gave not only their lives as well as their well-being and contributed so much to our future. So I want to get away from referring to it as a memorial.
So I guess we should talk about placement first. The yellow in this slide square is the proposed placement, and it's currently a green belt in front of the terminal. It's planted in grass. This model here represents a scale model of that piece of land. And the sculpture, everything is in scale. So you see it's, overall not really big. I mean, I know in the newspaper the picture looked pretty big, and this probably looks big when you look at the people to scale, but in the scale of the airport, it's rather small. Again, by design, I didn't want anything that competed with the architecture of the building. I felt that was very, very important that we didn't take away from the new terminal. This is a close-up giving you the proposed hardscape, these walkways, which this was what was presented to ABR. They have requested that we actually narrow this pavement down, reduce the size a little bit to retain more greenbelt, which I don't see a problem with. There's some symbolism in this. World War II was a different conflict for the U.S. Than certainly any of the conflicts we're in today. And really it was a crossroads for our country, hence the cross. We were very late getting in. We didn't want to get in and got in because we had to bring peace back to the world. So it's not so much, this piece I don't feel so much is about warriors as much as about, this idea of giving and service. So again, as Karen said, it's about people in service. These are views of the sculptures relative to the location, and it's probably hard to see, but that's like a before and that's after. And you can see it's because it's glass and it's clear, it doesn't really jump out at you. It's going to be tasteful and elegant and understated, sort of. Again, not to compete with the terminal or the historic terminal. The current proposed height is 20 feet above grade, so that is from this to the tallest part of the glass. There's a bronze medallion in the ground underneath it, and then the buttresses that hold it up, the ABR requested that there be seating incorporated in that. Those are also proposed to be fabricated bronze, so the buttresses will be bronze and now will incorporate benches. And that's about where we're at.
Talk
So
about the-
we're currently doing structural engineering on the glass and the buttresses to nail that down. Once the structural engineering's done, then I'll come back and design the benches and the buttresses. It's lit. It will be lit like this, edge lit from underneath. No external lighting. Lit with high efficiency LEDs. This is a glass sandwich of laminated glass. It's essentially made the way bulletproof glass is made. I don't know the thickness yet. I should know that. Hopefully in a week or two, the engineers are calculating that now. I'm guessing it's going to be, 3 to 4 inches thick.
Do we have wording for the medallion?
The current proposed wording, it says U.S. Marine Corps Air Station, Santa Barbara, 1942 to 1946.
No, that's quite all right. I just was
So,
curious.
I mean, it's just real simple, and then there'll be some inscription in the buttresses to commemorate why it's there. Again, explain the purpose for it.
So the seating that AVR requested, would that be kind of recessed in the buttresses, or how would it?
I envision the buttresses coming up and going back and then going up. So essentially, they become a bench,
So kind of recessed.
which in my proposal, I had benches here, and they thought it would be better to just make incorporate them into the buttress and leave this grass area without benches. So
The overall length of the base is approximately what? 10 feet?
right now, that's going to be determined by the engineering. So if you'll notice here, this is a very wide base, that glass. So in this case, the buttresses would be much wider. The makeup of this glass, it goes down more to a point. So I have the structural engineers working on both rakes or both glass designs. In this glass design, the benches are about 10 feet, 12 feet. And that one, they're longer. They're going to be closer to probably, I should have brought a ruler. But
Well, it appears as though it's almost half the height.
yeah, I mean, you're probably in the 10, 12 feet range. These, I think, are down to 65, 60.
Just a functional question. What would keep birds from perching all over that? Will they just slide off, or?
Well, it's
Electric wires.
the only place where a bird can really gain access would be the top. And,
Right.
I did a fair amount of investigation out at the airport. These pictures, these renderings, are based on me going out there with a story pole, and I actually put up a 20-foot ruler, took photos from these angles, and then rendered this object in there utilizing that as a reference. So I spent, several half days out there, and you don't have a lot of birds. I think it might have something to do with the traffic overhead. It's interesting because there's that bird sanctuary at the closer to the beach, but in my experience in this area, there wasn't a lot of birds. Pedestrian traffic, but no bird traffic, which is good.
Well, I think it's a really exciting design, and it's sort of multi-function. It's got the wings, the airport theme there. I guess I would share AVR's concern that it would be too large appearing and not on that kind of a human scale. You said you had a pole out there. Are there plans to kind of put any sort of mock-up out there to really finalize the ratio of the size?
Certainly, we could do that. Once I get the feedback back from the structural engineers, I'm going to build a full-size mock-up. So I think it's important on a project of this, this budget and this scale, it's just worth doing. So
Sure. Yeah, I
The
realize.
unfortunate thing is that mock-up would be wood. So it's going to look entirely different.
Right.
The one thing with the glass, especially in this case with it being clear, visually it's not, it doesn't have the same weight of this if this object were done in something solid, something that wasn't translucent.
So question, maintenance.
Very little maintenance. The lighting system is rated for 50,000 hours. As far as the glass, I've spec'd what they call self-cleaning glass. It's a coating they put on the glass. They use it in skyscrapers so they don't have to wash the windows. Essentially, it ionizes during the day to like a positive, and then at night it goes negative. So it literally repels dirt.
I can just see the window washers hanging
Yeah.
on the thing trying to get it clean.
But, it'll probably have to be washed once or twice a year, but I don't think it's not going to be like a daily thing. It shouldn't anyway.
And the lighting's on a timer.
I'm sorry, the lighting will be, on whatever system control you guys have for controlling lighting.
Is the lighting system accessible for replacements, or is it
Yeah.
kind of an okay.
Yeah, one of the reasons I chose fabricated bronze for the buttresses is because it allows me to fabricate access panels to get in there and not only change the lighting out, but also make sure that all the structural elements are behaving themselves. The internal structure will be stainless steel, so what you don't see is the glass, at this height here, that's 20 feet, but there's another probably 3 to 4 feet sticking into that thing, and that's pocketed in a channel that's stainless steel, marine grade stainless steel, with a silicon gasket that holds it in, locks it in place.
And the lights, just one color, not various colors, just color shift.
Christmas.
We can change it for different times of the year, like Valentine's Day.
Actually, it's LEDs come in RGB, and you could have that
Adjustment.
ability.
To Las Vegas.
Red, white, and blue.
Exactly. We're trying to keep it really at something that is elegant and simple and minimalist. And I'm very pleased with the process so far. When I came up with this, I bounced it off Karen and some other people informally before taking it to the commissions, and I knew the art commissions would love it. The Marines I was a little nervous about, and they actually embraced it. So I think that was the biggest hurdle, to be quite honest. It has some noteworthiness to it in that at its present size, based on the research I've done, it will be the single largest cantilevered self-standing glass sculpture in the world. So, and the current engineering teams that are working on it, one's in the Midwest. I've got the 2 top glass structural engineers in the world doing the structure on it, because it's got to be done right.
And we're looking at it for safety,
Everything.
earthquake.
It'll be earthquake, hurricane,
want them to be
everything.
bad.
It's all that stuff, all the magic words. And like I said, it's a laminated glass panel, so it's extremely robust.
One of the joys of being on this commission is to try to educate the public. And one of the equal joys is to hear from the public when there's a project like this. And since it was put in the newspaper, I've received a lot of comment on it. And it's sometimes difficult to represent the public when your own opinions may differ from the greater good. The majority of the comments that I have received from the public are not in favor of the design. No offense to the designer or the artist, because I think it's beautiful work. It is outstanding. It is world class. It is the biggest and best in the world. But the concern of the majority of the public, and I'm I'm seeing about a 3-to-1 ratio of negative comments to 1 positive comment, is the fact that they are not seeing the relationship of the tribute to the art. Now, every time Santa Barbara has had a public art program, there has always been differing opinions. That is what's beautiful about art, is it inspires conversation. But it still comes back to the majority of the people that have come to me are saying, I don't understand at all what it means and the relationship of the tribute. Now, the Marines embraced it, and they saw that. I can understand it as well, but how do we make that more clear to the public?
I think first off, the newspaper articles did, unfortunately, the rendering they used was a wide angle shot, and it made it look huge compared to the rest of the terminal. So I know there were some negative comments about that.
The fact that it was taller than a 2-story building?
Yeah, which it isn't. The other thing is, I'm sure you're aware, is for every negative comment you hear, there's probably 100 people that love it that don't care to tell you that. I will tell you that both the city and county arts commissions approved it unanimously. I mean, enthusiastically. The ABR, which apparently has a reputation for not approving things, approved it unanimously and enthusiastically. And they're I think they really look at stuff, from that standpoint. As far as what it means, I can tell you what I told the Clayson's people and the other committees. Again, World War II isn't like a current day conflict, and I didn't see this as a sculpture that was honoring warriors, because these, for the most part, the people who fought in World War II weren't warriors. They were farmers and, high school kids and college kids and bakers and librarians and people who left their career, left their family, left their homes, left their lives to fight in a foreign land for a war that they didn't start, to essentially bring peace to the world. And I don't think there's any higher level of service than that. I mean, so this is to celebrate, it's really ethereal. I mean, I'm surprised in a way that people aren't complaining about the religious aspect of it, but it's not any denomination of religion, but it's about the spirit of giving. The ultimate gift in this case, so people gave their lives. And if not their lives, they gave away, 4 years or 6 years or 8 years of their lives for the common good. And that's what it's about. It's about anybody who puts themselves out there for somebody else.
And I very greatly respect that. But the brass medallion doesn't convey what you've just said.
Yeah, there's going to have to be more, obviously more explanation than just the medallion. The medallion's part of the design to get the historical aspect of, and there will be explanation engraved in the buttresses as well that explains the history of the airport.
And what you just described.
And the service, the men in service, yes.
That, I think, would be my biggest concern based on the comments, because if that is conveyed, then it becomes, no pun intended, more clear.
Yeah, absolutely. We realize that there needs to be a storyline, if you will, with it. The other thing that there will be an educational aspect of it as well. The Clayson's Museum is intending on having essentially a Wi-Fi beacon there, if you will, so that people can read about it on their phone or their iPad or their whatever. So there'll be essentially a website attached to it, telling the story of the Santa Barbara Airport when it was the Marine base, and also the history of, some of the history of World War II and modern conflict, and in keeping with the mission of the museum and the library.
Thank you.
Like Kirk, I got 1,000,001 letters and notices on the people not liking it. I don't particularly like it. I'm sorry about that. I don't get the message from it. I've been around. I spent a lot of time with combat pilots. Are there any combat pilots on the Marines that helped you do this? I had one guy really talk to me about, an older guy, about he didn't care for the angels bit.
Yeah.
He didn't like that reference. He says he's not a warrior, but he's not an angel. He's a person that does the job.
Well,
And there was a lot of the dorsal fin of a fish is what was commented about the wings. They were not indicative of the wings that it is commemorative to all the services. It's an international wing. And I really have not had good comments, and I wrote a letter primarily to see if I could get response. I got response, but I couldn't get them to write letters. So is this a fait accompli?
Well, so far, your comments will be forwarded on to VAP, and really the City Arts Advisory Committee. I suppose City Council has the last say.
I mean, I have to admit, I appreciate the concept and so forth. However, art, I have a problem with the arts business, is that I think all art on the airport should be somewhat removable so you can move things in and out. And I include this more as art than a memorial, personally. But that's me. I just hope that we can get more input, because some of the comments have been, I won't repeat them, but there's been a lot of them.
Mr. Chair? Yes. It's really unfortunate that the news press article did come out, because I think it did a very big disservice to this. People formed opinions. Most people don't even know what the project is about. They base it on what they saw, the photograph in the newspaper. And I do think that's unfortunate. And it is art. It isn't meant to be in a memorial. It's not meant to be a Corsair on a stick or on a... I mean, that was kind of the initial, when we did the World War II memorial, is when I started out with the Marine group, what they wanted was a Corsair stuck on top of it. And actually talking them through, we came to something that was a respectful memorial to not only the squadrons that served here, but the local aviators that died. But this is not a memorial. It's a tribute. It's something that the Pierre Clyson's Veterans Museum and Library is paying for, and that was what they wanted, was a tribute to people who gave their lives as well as fought in World War II. They may have come home, but they sacrificed a lot for all of us. But it is art. I mean, it also, it's not a literal representation of, an object from World War II, I guess is what I'm...
I asked a similar question of people I talked to about, what do you think? You talk about, is it to be a thunderbolt or something sitting on the top of a post? Most of them didn't agree with that. They agreed to the point that it needs to be a tribute or something or other. I think one of the biggest objections was the style of wings. It looked like the dorsal fin off a fish. I hate to put it that way, but if you look at the wings of the pilots that did things, whether they're all the different wings all over, paratroopers, everything else, the wings have a definite shape, international shape. That was one of the comments. It should have been along those lines more, so you could tell what it is. It's wings from the combat, not necessarily combat, but of those that do things, whether they fly an airplane or what it is. They would do something with the air. That would seem to be the biggest thing. And the fact that I had several references to it being neon art.
I don't know.
So I don't know how you get around that. Like I say, my only personal is the style of wings.
We actually, I started using medals from that era. The Clayson's Museum gave me a bunch of medals to come up with the wing design, and my earlier mock-ups were of a more conventional wing, very much stylized after the medals, and they didn't like that. And you had asked if any flyers were on the board of Clason's. They're all flyers. Every single one of them's a pilot, was a pilot in World War II. And, there's generals, and, I mean, they're all people who served. So,
Well, like I say, I just touched base with someone for about 8 years in the 60s. I served with a bunch of Marine and Air Force, Navy combat pilots, and even some from World War II. I contacted about a couple of them just on general things, and they, like I say, don't consider them angels. They don't consider thinking you need to have guns and everything. The Marine emblem. In fact, one of the comments on the newspaper I thought was kind of weird, and I didn't like it, but I see you have it. It said we're not going to even include the emblem.
well, it is on
So
the-
I mean that is really
That's, again, it's unfortunate that an incorrect photograph, incorrect information, and then people are forming their opinions on it.
no. I see it now, and I scratch that note. But like I say, we're still going to have a lot of public comments. So how do you get around it? Do you ignore it, or we've had some previous artwork on the airport that has been constant comment forever. So how do you clarify it? I do think that you might look at the wing bit, whether you keep it as a luminaria type or anything, but look at the styling a bit and maybe taper it a bit more like it. I don't know. I'm not the art, but I also am one that has to look at it, like a lot of people who have commented.
This alternative design with the more tapered wing is my preferred approach. I'm not sure structurally if it's feasible, which is why the wider wing. The model that you're looking at just came back from Washington, D.C. It went back there for a Veterans Convention symposium where I wasn't there, but the gentleman who took it there said it was enthusiastically received by the Marine Corps back there. So
I would certainly agree that the pictures in the paper that were presented are really very different from this, and it would be difficult to form an opinion.
I would also suggest if you could put some mock-ups or some of these things on display with a comment sheet, maybe down at City Hall, maybe down at some plaza somewhere, something that maybe that's the wrong thing. Maybe you get the wrong kind of comments. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that you can do it by voting.
Right.
It's
Well, I
just-
don't mean by voting, but just see what you get. You might even put it in the airport terminal so people can look at it.
Well, I think we can put, I think it's a good idea to put the model so people can see it. Everybody's going to have a different opinion, just like the terminal architecture.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that. And now, people love it. And, it's just, art is in the eye of the beholder, I guess, and
Look what happens when the art commission puts some things on the corners. Look how the town got in an uproar on that.
well, and that's sort of what Commissioner Martin said, is art is supposed to inspire conversation and ideas, and
But this art is permanent fixture. I think that was the other thing. So keep that in mind. It's permanent. It's not going to go away. You can't move it and let another artist in on it.
If I may interject, Commissioner, we are representative of our constituency, if you will. I do feel that there was a misrepresentation and there were some misconceptions and opinions drawn upon those misconceptions. Upon discussion, clarification, we have to look at whether this, first off, meets aesthetically and principally what it is to do. If it is conveyed, as you indicated, there will be more information to that. And then if we look at what is the greater good versus the negative comments, the fact that it is a world-class tribute, unequaled anywhere, the fact that that will be a banner of pride as well as the tribute itself and what it stands for when it is communicated, all those things in my mind would trump the negative opinions from the misconception, and it would achieve the goal that we're designing it to do so. And in honor of the director, no, this isn't a referendum, we are to make that decision for our constituency. It is not for the public to vote on. And so I have been satisfied.
I'd like to add one comment, if I could. I have been doing public art now for 6 years. Before that, did systems consulting work. It's my 7th public art project. None of my projects have been controversial. I mean, they've all not offended anybody. But it's quite common, actually, for public art to actually offend certain people. Not that they don't think it's maybe the right visual, but they get offended. To my knowledge, nobody's been offended by this yet. They have comments that perhaps it's too big or it's too squatty or, whatever, the things but I don't think, to my knowledge, any group has come out and said, this insults us on this level. And I think that's important to say because that's uncommon in the world of public art.
Well, I did have the comment that they didn't quite care for the angel,
Well, I didn't, it's not meant to be angel. It's
They
meant
didn't want to be called warriors or Indians or anything else, but they didn't particularly, they took a little, maybe it's because of what happens if you make a mistake. But they didn't really care for it. But like I say, I don't know how much you talk about these misconceptions from the articles and so forth. Maybe they were and maybe they weren't. I look at that picture and I don't think it's a misconception of it being bigger than a thing. I can see the perspective, but that's me again. So let's don't count that as being the only thing. So you're going to have to work at it. That's what I'm saying.
Just one more kind of practical issue, I guess, and not to question the ABR, and I'm all for practical, functional art and approachable art, but I would have concerns about having benches built into the base because I'm afraid it would kind of encourage people to look at it as a piece of furniture and playing on it, standing on the benches, putting handprints all over the glass. Make it that much more difficult to keep people kind of at a more respectful distance. I mean, it is a piece of art. It is a monument of sorts. So again, my really only concern, and I think it's a really great design, would be about turning it into a piece of furniture.
I have an issue with the benches because you're sitting here with your back to it.
Yeah, the benches haven't been designed yet, so, that could be something that we go back to ABR and say, I have similar concerns as yours. Maybe we're better off putting benches here.
Correct.
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
face
So you can-
forward,
yeah.
and we can still do them as an integrated portion of the art, but it's not where somebody can use it to scale up on the thing or whatever.
I've got it, you've read my mind. This has been really bugging me, this whole bench concept. And, when you start getting into code issues here, ADA access and approaches, plus vandalism, okay? Now you've got kids hanging out, waiting for mom and dad, they're climbing on the glass, they're scratching the glass. What do we know about the glass's ability to withstand vandalism?
Well, at the thickness it's going to be at, it's essentially bulletproof glass.
Right, but I'm
And
talking about
if it
diamonds.
gets scratched, if somebody scratches it, it can be polished out. When you have glass this thick, you've got a
No,
lot
I
of room
understand.
to polish.
But
So
I think it's going to be an
But I
attractive
agree.
nuisance.
I think benches on the perimeter make way more sense because then the buttresses get it up high enough and they can be wide enough that people can't actually grab hold of the thing.
How about head clearance on that? You're walking into a piece of glass there. Is there some issue there about clearance
The way it's
on the
way
path?
I'm envisioning it, the design working is the buttresses come out far enough so that when you walk through, unless you go over a buttress, you can't hit your head.
Okay, because that's not.
This is just clay to hide the LEDs, but like I said, the base hasn't really been designed.
Yeah, I think you're inviting all sorts of problems incorporating benches into the foundation.
And, you know, that, again, was a suggestion from ABR to look at. That wasn't, I don't
not a
think, an edict, if you will.
One of the issues that was discussed or asked about at ABR was vandalism. And I really, you know, it's not that it can't occur, but because the facility is occupied so much of the day, and we have patrol officers over there a lot of the day, we have airline staff and so forth, you know, it's possible, but I don't think it's as likely. And our memorial, when we did that, I had one of the Marines going, "You're going to have vandalism," and we haven't had any.
My comment was really more specific to having the benches and having people just turn
Be
their
right
backs
up
on
there.
it. Kids are climbing on it.
Sure.
And, you know, they're hanging on it.
Yeah.
You know, some height in the buttress and no benches would cure a lot of that.
Yeah, that was my original concept, actually, was the buttresses were high enough that you couldn't have access to the glass. And it also, you know, gives me more room to facilitate servicing the mounts and the lights, and you don't have to go subterranean. It just, from a value engineering standpoint alone, makes more sense.
Are you intending to slope the buttresses, the cap, the bronze cap, or is it going to be a flat surface?
It'll have a slight slope to it so water runs off.
Yeah.
So.
And is it quintessential to the design to have people walking underneath it?
No, I don't feel so.
The reason I ask is, for instance, if you were to raise the medallion, that would discourage people from walking under it.
So if it were to be a mound,
It would kind of, you wouldn't have people on the buttresses or
Right.
underneath.
Well, we could raise the whole thing, so essentially you'd have like a 12-foot diameter circle raised up 3 feet with that coming
That's
out of it,
what I
and
was
then
wondering.
nobody walks through it. It's like on a pedestal. if
And
you
I'm
will.
not trying to change the design, but I was kind of listening to the comments, and it does sort of invite, if you have people very close to it, it invites that opportunity when nobody's looking.
Sure.
And it is beautiful. And obviously, we want to preserve that in its best fashion with the least amount of maintenance possible, and that may be something to consider.
well, I think from my standpoint, I will say that I've had a lot of negative comments, but I will also say that that's usually what you hear. The people that are not in support of are not going to speak up, or they're going to stay, such as myself. I look at it, and I look at it, I think it's very beautiful. I couldn't tell you if proportion, once it's there, is going to be right. I would have to rely upon, hopefully, these people who are on the arts councils, et cetera, that are evaluating this and saying, yes, it's the right scale. Because I love our terminal. We spent a lot of years putting that together, and to have something diminish that or try to take away from it. So I would totally support this if it is, in fact, in scale, and that we can all kind of get behind that. I certainly could not tell you, and maybe it's when we have the mock-up there. But, I mean, I love the passion that you have put into this and the reason that you put into this and how you come up with that.
More of a legal question, rhetorical, but since it is going to be a very prominent part of the airport terminal, and the airport terminal is photographed a zillion different ways, you know, someone smarter than me, the city attorney's office has got to figure out, well, who owns the image, right?
Right, and with all of our art, we have provisions in there for our use of photographing it and using it, you know, using the art how we want. The agreement, the Pierre Kleisson's Foundation will be giving this to the city, and we will have some provisions in there with the artist as well, just like we do in all of our art.
How much do we have to tear up of what we've already done in order to put this in?
The
The 12
Just a grass mound, or we?
The grass
That's
mound,
what I heard,
basically.
something about sidewalks and a few other things.
The grassy knoll.
Well, if we eliminate the the ability to walk underneath it, then you could eliminate the sidewalks. At that point, you're talking about a 12-foot, probably about a 18-foot diameter circle, somewhere between 12 and 18 feet, depending on what the engineers come up with.
Kind of a time frame we talking on this? Any idea? I mean, we'll see it put up in 2014 or,
It'd be next year.
I think at least.
pardon?
it'll be
Next
a
year,
I would
probably
say.
the early summer next 2013.
No, it is a guarantee. Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Assuming,
you very
we
much.
get the coastal commission approvals.
All that. Okay, so you saw where we were on the, we will come back.
Yes.
If you would like to have a joint meeting with VAP, we can arrange that as well. So that's something you might want to think about and let me know if you'd like to do that.
Okay.
Kind of share your comments, and I will forward the comments that I heard tonight on as well. Okay.
Item number.
Your poll?
Yeah, item number. Yes, on to more practical matters. Item 15, which
We
is,
have the selection of AMCO parking system to operate the airport parking lots, and Ms. Johns will take the report.
Thank you. Last month, I gave you a briefing on the process that we had gone through to do our selection for a parking operator to manage our parking lots and provide our shuttle service. And if you recall, FAA recently, within the last 5 years, I guess, decided that a management contract for parking does qualify as a competitive bid. So we were required to go out for a competitive process. We prepared a request for proposals, and we distributed that in early March. Had a mandatory pre-bid conference because we really wanted folks to see the airport, see the parking situation with the Lot 2 and a shuttle operation. We had 7 companies participate at that pre-proposal meeting. From the 7, all 7 proposals met the submittal requirements. After staff went through the proposals, we selected 3 companies to have further conversations and have them provide additional information to us that where we had questions or just needed them to expound some on the proposals that they submitted. Those companies, as you can see, were Ace Parking Management, Inc. They have their closest facility that I'm aware of is in Palm Springs. We had our existing company, AMCO System Parking, and then Standard Parking also was interviewed. Our selection went with AMCO Parking because we really have received, I think, excellent parking management services since they've been with us for about 11 years. They have a sound financial condition without any issues there. The local manager, Wendy Lozano, has just been outstanding. The management fee for the first year was reduced, and their overall management fee was less than most of the other proposals that we received. And they're upgrading our shuttle operation with 3 new vans, one CNG van, which they'll provide at no cost to the airport. Excuse me. Their proposal also obviously complied with all of our submittal requirements.
Can you identify the acronym of CNG, please?
Tracy,
CNG.
thank you.
Compressed natural gas.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I knew natural gas. I forgot the C. The contract that we're recommending to Airport Commission has an initial 3-year term. There are 2 one-year options, and those are sole options of the airport for us to execute. The management fee for the first year, as you see, is $19,500. And each succeeding year through the options is $39,000. They are, as you know, our parking management program complies with the city living wage ordinance. But by doing that, too, and looking at our program, the proposed budget that was submitted with the proposal is about $200,000 less than what I submitted in our budget to the city. So hopefully we'll be able to manage that and come in $200,000 under. We also requested in that proposal for the companies to identify whether or not they could provide additional services. One service that we repeatedly are asked for at the terminal, SkyCap service, someone to assist with luggage, someone to help those who need wheelchair assistance. The other item was the taxi cab starter as part of the ground transportation program that Tracy's been working on, which will come back to Airport Commission later. AMCO can provide both of those services and has experience in doing both. So we were excited about that as well. So tonight we're just recommending that Airport Commission approve our selection of AMCO System Parking for the management of our parking operation. Be happy to answer any question. We also have representatives from AMCO here. If you have any specific questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them.
So is it correct, of your highest ranked proposals, this was also the lowest cost?
Not necessarily the lowest cost. It was the most reasonable cost. We did have a proposal, and I can't recall exactly the company, but it was really way under our threshold in all respects, not just the management fee, but the actual budget as well.
Okay.
But of the 3 that we interviewed, yes, it is
Okay.
less than the
Those
3.
you thought were fully compliant and
Exactly.
met your requirements, it was
Yes.
the lowest. Okay.
Rather quiet here.
Well, I would make the motion to accept your proposal to award the contract to AMCO.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
T-hangers.
All right. Well, last month in my absence,
Boy, howdy.
never go on vacation again.
She said, what happened while she was gone? And I said, not much.
And every hour she's going, oh, yeah.
I forgot to tell you.
Well, why don't you go, I don't even know where to start with this. I would recommend, this particular item recommends that we change the lottery wording in the T-hanger rules and regulations to allow it to be periodic, so that if we have a vacancy, we can fill it right away. What I would like to suggest is that we bring back to you next month language that would just take the lottery out. I mean, it seems to me there's no point. I mean, this way it's just become an impediment. So work with the GA subcommittee this next month and come up with language just to eliminate the lottery provision and still have, requirements for the people that are going to be on the list. But or if you would prefer, we could go ahead with this, but that would be my recommendation.
Accepting this amendment would not preclude our further reviewing that. It would
No.
take any pressure off in case a vacancy arrived next week or in the next month while we deliberated the proper wording of a waiting list.
Oh, you
could
are
we
on the
decide-
committee.
Well, also, if we
Yes.
were to table this for review of edited wording, it would just be a 30-day table.
I would hope we could, I mean, the wording that we're changing is not that much.
Right.
And it just,
So it would be tabled until the following meeting for review
July.
of edited language, which would not affect, we certainly couldn't meet prior to that, or fill a vacancy if one should sporadically occur. And I think that would mean that we would not have to amend an amendment.
Well, I would suggest that it would probably be not an amendment to an amendment, but a rewrite of that particular section to be more, in the case of a standard waiting list, something that didn't,
right.
Have all these kind of complexities. And I think I've been fairly clear on my position on it. I think it would be well served with a standard waiting list, but there is the issue of how to deal with ties to applicants arriving on the same day in the mail or walking in the door side by side, which is, as I see it, about the only complexity there might be to such a waiting list.
Next in line is always the simplest.
So whatever, I mean, if you wanted to go ahead and do this, we can just work on an amendment to take the lottery out for next month or the month after. I mean, it's really
That's-
whatever you
I
want
think
to
it would
do.
be less confusing to not make too many changes, so I would make a motion to not amend the rules and regulations as they are now in favor of taking it back to the subcommittee and doing a full revision.
Okay.
I would second that.
Does everybody understand
Yes.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In favor of not accepting.
In
Right.
favor of not accepting this. Put
Okay,
a
and we'll get
negative in
a
there.
subcommittee scheduled quickly so that we can,
And we
Give
did,
them.
in fact, at one point waive the lottery
Last
when
time.
there was only one applicant and one vacancy.
Right.
So
I know.
it's been a while.
It's been a while. Item 17.
our fiscal year 2013 airport commercial industrial lease rates. And are you doing it?
Rebecca is going to.
Snuck in.
It's like the Queen. If I had a hat, you'd see the hat. But I'm here to present the Business and Properties Division recommendations for airport commercial industrial rates for the following year. Approximately 97% of our airport revenue is derived from the fees that are associated with our rents, both for aviation and commercial industrial purposes. And our projected revenue for fiscal year 2012 is $3,850,000, and we are expecting to be able to either meet or exceed that goal. We are managing at the current time about 50 buildings containing over 300,000 square feet of leasable space. Over 98% of those buildings have been leased throughout this fiscal year. We have 109 acres of land with over almost 5 million leasable square feet, and we've also been able to exceed our goal of 98% leased this year. So on the whole, in spite of the economy, we're quite pleased. We have 138 tenants and 154 agreements that we're currently managing. There are a number, as you know, of different types of tenant leases. We not only have the terminal concessionaires such as the rental cars, the gift shop, the restaurants, but we also have general aviation agreements with the FBOs, some maintenance shops, flight schools, plus commercial and industrial leases, which range from everything from 12 by 12 spaces up to 3 or more buildings. We have a lot of research and development groups because I think of our proximity to companies like Raytheon and also the university. And we also have a number of very small businesses like plasterers and cabinet makers, individual sorts of sole proprietorships. The FAA requires us to maintain our rentals at market rates, and we annually assess how we're doing in terms of the general community by looking at data from the UCSB economic forecast, appraisals, and local real estate comparables. This year, because of the state of the economy, we looked at the possibility of reducing some of our rental rates. As you know, we've held our rates steady for over 3 years now and made no adjustments. But based on the fact that the CPI has not been doing particularly well, and the fact that our properties are staying on the market longer prior to filling them, we thought that it was probably appropriate at this time to take a look and have an appraisal done. We did that, and the results were somewhat surprising. So we took them to Lease Review Subcommittee, and Lease Review Subcommittee recommended that we get a second appraisal to verify the first. In 2012, we've seen continuing consolidation of business sites. We've had one tenant that did go out of business. The demand for small storage yards, on the other hand, is slightly increasing. Some of the ones that have been on the market for quite a while are now starting to fill up, and on the whole, our properties are remaining vacant longer. So we did our appraisals. We hired Hammock, Arnold & Smith, and Schott & Company. And we are coming to you tonight with a recommendation that we do a downward adjustment, particularly of the bottoms of some of our rates, based on these results and also local comparables. As you can see on this chart, our rates in opposition to Galitas rates were a little bit lower, but we're looking at University Business Park properties as opposed to our 60-year-old temporary buildings. Our commercial industrial rates were a little bit lower, but generally not too bad. Office spaces are really starting to slow down in terms of the rentals. Unfortunately, because of our particular situation, warehouse comps have been very difficult to get. A lot of warehouse spaces in this area have been converted into partial office spaces. They're not necessarily being used as big open spaces anymore. The calls that we were able to make looking at other storage units, the storage units were much smaller and much, much more expensive. They weren't the types of spaces that we really have. And land, we seem to be pretty much the only game in town. There really is not a lot of land that comes on the market in Goleta for rent. So we were really unable to get comps for that. Right now, the average per square foot rate for our land at the airport is 16 cents if it's an unpaved lot and 20 cents if it's a paved lot. As you can see on the chart, the changes that we're proposing to reduce the bottom end of the office rate. The majority of our tenants right now are probably in the $1.40 to $1.48 range. For them to actually get up to $1.85 would take a long, long time at 3% per year. I'm not proposing any changes for industrial R&D because I think we're pretty much on target there, and we have such a wide variety of different types of industrial and R&D spaces that gives us the latitude to be able to make adjustments based on the amenities of the facility. Storage and warehouse space, I am recommending that we drop the base rate for warehouse space down to 65 cents per square foot and bring the top down to 85 cents per square foot, and this is based on the condition of the storage facilities that we have available. On the land, I would like to see the base rate come down to 13 cents per square foot. We've had a couple of appraisals that have recommended that to us in the past 2 or 3 years. And on some of our larger pieces of land, certainly that would be a range that's probably more reasonable than 14, 15 cents per square foot, particularly if it's undeveloped. The 30-cent top, honestly, I don't see us getting there anytime soon. The only possibilities for that type of a range would be the Hollister corridor and some sort of a commercial or a retail establishment. And since we do this revision annually, if the economy suddenly takes off, we have the ability to come back next year and reinstate some of these top rates. We are getting rid of the storage container category in discussing the storage container situation with our planners. They felt that the airport giving Measure E square footage, which is a development square footage. We have a bank. Every time we do a development, we have to take square footage out of that bank or qualify for certain categories. Like when we built the terminal, we had square footage that we used from different categories plus some square footage that we accumulated when we took buildings down on the airport. That a storage container really is more of a shed. Instead, sheds don't require Measure E square footage, and therefore, if we're not required to take square footage out of our bank, it has no value, and therefore we don't need to charge additional money for storage containers on the storage lots. So we're recommending that we just simply eliminate that category. And we would continue to charge for additional parking spaces above and beyond those that the tenants are entitled to at the rate of $14 per month. So our recommendation is that Airport Commission approve the proposed fiscal year 2013 commercial industrial rental rates for land and buildings at the airport as presented.
Quick question.
Yes.
On the previous page, on some of the rate changes, if, for instance, on land, we wouldn't approach the 30 cents, why would we need to change it down from 37?
We really don't have to, except that when our rates are published, every time they're published on our website, the packet of materials that we hand out to the tenants or potential tenants when they do an application shows all of these rate categories. And if a tenant is looking at it, as many of our tenants are, and they're looking to get a reasonable rate, it scares them a lot less if they see top rates that are not quite so high. So mostly, I think it's probably more promotional value than anything else.
To eliminate fright.
Sticker shock.
Okay, thank you. That helped a lot.
You're welcome.
These are the rate scales, basically, and there's a lot of factors that go into any particular rate that's set on any particular parcel. I think all of us, particularly those of us on the lease review subcommittee who've seen all the work that's gone into this, really appreciate it. This has been a fairly lengthy activity to go back and review these and have them reevaluated. And we certainly appreciate all the work that went into it. It was done with a lot of thought. Thank you.
Yeah, make a motion or we accept the recommendation for the 213 lease rates.
I'll second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Airline rates and charges.
Favorite topic. And Ms. Johns will give that report.
Ms. Jones, I love the way you say that. Airline rates and charges, we do this annually because we do not have lease agreements with the airlines, but rather operating permits. And you'll recall that last year we changed the method in which we establish our rental rates for the terminal space, landing fees, and boarding bridge fees. So we're doing it again this year based on that same methodology. We had our consultant update the financial feasibility spreadsheet and distributed that to the airlines for their consideration. a few items on air service changes that we've noticed in the last year. The number of seats, our capacity at the airport continues to be less than what we've had in prior years. This year, we're down about 12.25% in number of seats available to on the various airlines. And because we're down with seats, we're also down in passenger traffic by 5% this year over last year. On the other hand, the positive side of that, the load factor for those flights is extremely high, with an average of 83%. That's, as Karen has pointed out before, when you get in the 80s, there are flights going out full or overbooked, and then you have additional problems with that. 2008, we had 6 carriers and 12 nonstop destinations, and today we have 5 carriers. And with Portland, we now have 6 destinations. And Portland service, once again, is going out full. I had an email from a local resident who said, I thought we had Portland service. I was in Portland trying to fly home to Santa Barbara, and I couldn't get there. And the reason is because the flight was full. So I'm not sure if that's good news or bad news, but I think our community really likes that service, and I'm hopeful that we can keep it. So the methodology for calculating the rates is an allocation system. We take the total budget for the next fiscal year, then we allocate it to the cost centers that you see listed here, with the airfield, the terminal building, the boarding bridge, or passenger boarding bridge, commercial industrial properties, and then other. And other could be includes parking, it includes roadways, infrastructure. And we identify direct and indirect expenses, obviously, and it also includes full debt service payments and annual deposits to the city's mandatory reserve policy, those that were established by City Council in the early 90s. As an example, we take the total building cost from that allocation. We offset that cost with revenues from the rental cars and from our concessions, because that is specific to the airline terminal. We come up with a net figure of $5.7 million. We divide that by the number of square feet inside the terminal, and we come out with $85 per square foot. So we're projecting $1.9 million in revenue for building rental next year. Similarly, we do the same thing for the boarding bridge. We look at operational costs. We look at our debt service on the boarding bridge. And then to calculate the fee, we look at how many airlines will actually use the boarding bridges. And that's called a turn. They bring it in, they depart. And we're thinking that there'll be 4,000 turns. That results in $65 per turn. So boarding bridge revenue would only be $260,000. For the landing fee, this is where everything falls to the bottom line. We take our total, the airport cost, subtract out every revenue source that we receive, come up with the net amount of $1.6 million. Then we project what the landed weights will be with all carriers, including charter. And that's estimated at 425,000 pounds. And if you were to take that and divide into the 1.6, you would actually have a landing fee of $3.97. This year, we negotiated with the airlines, and they unanimously agreed to increase the landing fee from the prior amount to $3.40, recognizing that there would still be a potential deficit of $244,000 that's not covered by the rates and charges. Part of that is to see how our budget really goes. Could be that we generate more revenue, could be that our operational costs are less. And so with the $3.40, we would generate $1.4 million in landing fees.
But in fact, sorry, to interrupt, but that $244,000, the actual, is going to be reconciled at the end. It'll be captured, and those companies will pick up whatever the actual cost is.
That's correct. We, in fact, thank you, Commissioner. we put in an extra provision in the operating agreement to meet after our mid-year, after December, so we'd meet in January with the airlines to see where we were mid-year on our budget with revenues and expenses. And if it looks as though we're not going to make it, then we would go back to the airlines and increase rates with them. Additionally, we do that after we file our budget for the next fiscal year in April. We'll have a second meeting to look for the future year. But there is a makeup provision for this current budget year. When the airlines, as I said, we sent the information out early to them in April. We had a meeting with the airlines and went over the information. We did make some adjustments to the fees because they did not want to have a larger deficit, which was potential, and they increased the landing fee rate to accommodate that. And we did reach agreement on June 1st with the airlines. This chart gives you the rates that we currently have for this year, 2012, and the proposed rates for 2013. So we are going up from $77 to $85 for building. We'll go up from $42 to $65 for the boarding bridge fees, and from $2.50 to $3.40 for the landing fees. Everyone said, well, how do you compare to other airports? And it doesn't work to say, well, we have $3.40 landing fee, what do you have? But rather the airlines look at their costs based on what they're paying to the airport based on the number of passengers that they have. That's called the cost per in-plane passenger. So our proposed rates for the next year, and as you can tell, if the number of passengers goes up, that rate comes down. If it goes the opposite way, the rate will go up because the costs are standard and it really only fluctuates with the number of passengers. When we did the bond feasibility report back in 2008 and we had lots of passengers back then, it was estimated to be $7.50 per in-plane passenger. When we actually did the bond sale in 2009 after the crash, and we were starting to lose passengers, it went to $8.95. This year, it's projected to be $8.81 per in-plane passenger. And based on the budget, without any changes, and with flat enplanements, it would be $9.99. Once again, we brought the proposed rates and charges to Lease Review Subcommittee for their review and comment. And they recommended approval of the rates, and certainly the committee members can make comments if you would like. And tonight we're just asking that you recommend these proposed rates so that we could go to City Council for their consideration. Questions?
On the $9.99, you couldn't.
Wasn't about to go to 10.
And so, we were talking about lighting earlier. Could we have like a flashing blue light with that?
I'd rather blue than red, I'll tell you.
Here's
nice report.
you mentioned in that CPE that you did do a survey of other airports, and that how does that ratio, or how does that $8.81 line up with a comparable airport?
It's less than the norm. It's a little over $10 per in-plane passenger.
Good to know.
And once again, it's going up because passenger
Counts are going down.
are down because they've cut
But
back.
operating costs, I mean, there's two sides of that ratio. Operating costs could be higher in our case.
Right, right.
All right. So there's room.
And again, I know an awful lot of work went into
Oh,
analyzing and preparing all these, and I think we really appreciate all the time and thought and
For those who
work
are
that goes
here
into
who
it.
are working.
I mean, you don't just throw it in the computer and it's formulatic. It comes out.
Well, then she has to arm wrestle with the airlines.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
Your reports are always refreshingly put together.
Thank you.
Do we need to recommend this to the?
Please.
Okay.
I move that we recommend that we recommend approval.
And I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
So
you.
recommended.
Thanks.
The director's report.
Your favorite part of the agenda.
We've been waiting for it.
I'll just point out a couple of items on the director's report, and again, if you want to me to speak on one that I don't mention, please let me know. Our passenger count for May was down 5.9% compared to May of last year, and year-to-date we're down 3.2% compared to the same period as last year. And as Hazel mentioned in her presentation, if we don't have the seats, it's really difficult to, have increasing passengers. So hopefully with the Portland service and if the economy keeps improving or will improve in a bigger way, and airlines will start adding some service back, hopefully. And speaking of air service, on June 4th, we started our Portland service, and it's, as Hazel said, the seats are all full. It's doing really well, and hopefully it will continue to do well and give Alaska some incentive to want to keep it year-round. So we'll just have to watch and see as they are. The other item I wanted to point out is on July 11th, we'll have our next master plan public workshop, and then the master plan committee will meet earlier in the day. And at these meetings, we'll be looking at demand, capacity, and facility requirements. So, and some environmental inventory, right? Thank you. As well. So you're all invited to attend. And that's all I was going to point out. If you have any other items, I'd be happy to
I
speak.
just want to remind, as we do serve to educate the public as well, what you brought up is not always blatantly clear to the general public, that air routes are determined by filling seats. And you have well put out that the Portland route is filling the seats. If we're turning away passengers or passengers are being turned away by the airline, not we, because there aren't seats available, that's a good thing, because that encourages them to keep the route. But so frequently, I'm sure my fellow commissioners will say, well, why can't you add this route, or why can't you get this? And I just want to take advantage of this situation where here is a good thing, where we're at 85%, we're filling seats, so the airlines will give consideration to retaining or adding routes.
Hopefully so, yes.
It's based on the market.
Market, right.
Yeah, I was gonna, having been there, it's really based on how much they make on those seats.
Yeah, true.
This is the
True.
ugly bottom line.
Right.
But it is a good thing to start the argument with of it's full.
Right.
Anything else? Bill?
Is there any council actions coming up before our next meeting? Such as the naming?
The naming of the terminal, and that will be July 24th. So I would invite you to join us.
When's our meeting in July? I don't have my calendar either. Is this after our meeting?
Yes.
Yes, right.
Yes.
So I'll send you out an email as a reminder, so you can mark it on your calendar.
It'll be a fairly quiet meeting.
Yeah. I'm sure council members would enjoy the support.
Did you want to mention this too, Bob?
Oh, yes. At your seat, our California Airports Council, which is an organization that was started a few years ago of airport managers and directors. And basically what we do is address legislative issues, both on the state and to the federal level to some degree, but really focusing on the state. This is the annual report that the organization put out, so I thought you might be interested in looking at it and kind of seeing what's going on with other airports in California.
And of course, we're in the front page.
Oh, yes, we are on the front page. I forgot to mention that.
And deservedly so.
Yes, exactly.
Just beat out that other airport by a hair.
On that note, I'm going to ask for a
Well,
motion to
just
adjourn.
for people to understand, the Sacramento Airport, new terminal airport, has a giant red rabbit sculpture. And that was the hair that he was speaking
You know,
of.
it's never as good if you have to.
In other words, we don't like to,
I know, but it's kind of hard to, when they can't see what you're looking at.
Thank you for that clarification, Madam Director.
And that is art.
Truly are. We're
Just
adjourned.
think.
Did we vote?